Hello, and there's a monster in your chest. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. This week, we are talking the 1997 film Alien Resurrection. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by a perfect clone of my co-host, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
I am absolutely ready for this one. It has been some time
since you watched this film. Yeah, right. I mean, I mentioned, I think in the last episode, that I had bought that Alien collection, the quadrilogy, sometime in the early 2000s, and that's the first time I took like a deep dive into the franchise. It's the first time I saw Alien Resurrection. And that's the last time I saw it until this week, preparing for this episode. I think it is widely regarded as a low point in the series, which is why it's got its own episode here. And it was interesting to revisit. I had my thoughts on it after that initial viewing years ago, and went in with a hashtag positivity podcast mindset, and I've got some fresh thoughts. I've got some new things to talk about. Of course, we're focusing on what works, but man, altogether, there's just a lot to unpack in this one.
There is. This is not one that's kind of... We talked about it last week, but Alien 3 has always kind of had that kind of air of missed opportunity more than anything. Like, people kind of accept that, like, Alien 3 is something where there's an unfortunate amount of interference, changes, how the producer cut maybe kind of redeems it, things like that. There's a lot of that for Alien 3. There's really none of that for Alien Resurrection. There's no group that kind of champions Alien Resurrection. Hashtag positivity podcast. But just kind of looking at the movie, there's not that kind of movement about it. It's a movie that arguably puts the franchise, it doesn't really put it on ice. Alien versus Predator isn't too long after this. But the idea of a solo Alien movie is gone for a long time after this. This kind of puts the button on that for some time, and to date, it is Sigourney Weaver's last appearance in the franchise. But legacy sequels are in. There's no telling of the end of this movie. Certainly, of all the things that I would figure to see in this time, I don't think a direct legacy sequel to Alien Resurrection might be amongst them. But there's certainly room for it. But we're here to talk about the positives and see what it does well.
We are. This will be our last episode on the Alien franchise, specifically the mainline Alien movies. We've got 1 week left in our Alien and Predator themed month. And you know what we've got to end on? Alien versus Predator. It's coming next week. But today, it's all about Alien Resurrection, the movie that was released November 26th, 1997, made on a budget of $70 million. At the box office worldwide, it brings in $161 million. That's not a flop at the box office, Andrew.
It is not.
Critically, however, it is not so well received. It holds just a 54% on Rotten Tomatoes, and this is a rare instance where the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is significantly lower than the critics. Audiences give this one a 39% on the old tomato meter.
That is, as we've established on a lot of our episodes here, as you've heard now, the audience score is almost always universally higher on things. It is very rarely lower, and it is very rarely, and even if it's not like a fresh score versus the critic score, it's usually higher. This is definitely an instance where the critics are not kind. They're not as negative as you might think. 54 is pretty middle of the road. I mean, that's pretty split. That's,
I mean, look, hashtag PP. I'm surprised it's 54. That's higher than I expected, to be honest.
I agree. I kind of agree with that. But the audience score is lower. It shows that even in hindsight, fans were less receptive to this installment than even the critics were.
The movie was written by Joss Whedon, and you're probably familiar with this man's work. Lots of stuff in sci-fi, TV, and film. But by a lot of accounts, not the best human being, and not someone I really want to heap a lot of praise on. So, Andrew, you want to move on to the director?
Oh, yeah. Joss Whedon wrote this movie. Moving on.
The movie is directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. This is his only American film. It's actually early in his career, only his third feature film. And he's a French director. And I looked up his filmography and I was shocked, Andrew, that immediately after this, his next two movies are Amelie and A Very Long Engagement, with him writing that second one, which I'm not the biggest foreign film buff, but I know those two movies very well. I was introduced to those while I was in high school. I've seen them a million times. I mean, Amelie in particular was a huge international success. It's probably his most famous movie, but my brain had a hard time wrapping my head around this being the same director, Alien Resurrection, in those two films, which I love very much, which are very different tonally and, dare I say, quality. Like it's just there's I don't see like any connective pieces between this movie and those two in particular, but very accomplished director, very good work, at least over there in France.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting kind of arc for him, because his first two movies, which are Delicatessen and The City of Lost Children, which he co-directs with Mark Caro, are those are very much collaborative efforts amongst them and additional writers, including Gilles Adrian and a couple of others, where they work together on those. And this is really the first movie, and possibly, I think, his only movie, where he has nothing to do with the writing process. Even on Amelie, he still has a story credit. And then he works with that same writer from Amelie on A Very Long Engagement to co-write the script together. And then every movie he's made since then, he has written. So this is another kind of rare instance where a director steps out from the writing chair, and in this case, actually stepped away from his co-director. So his two movies before this, he had the co-director. So this is his first solo-directed film that he doesn't write, and to date, it's the only movie he's got no story credit on. So it's like many others, I'm sure it was an interesting experiment, an idea to potentially get into the Hollywood kind of film landscape. And obviously it did not quite pan out that way. Amelie, like we said, though, was a huge, big success. That is a movie that you can see in a variety of places. I know Alamo Drafthouse shows it quite a lot, made quite an impact. So he definitely bounced back. And, it's interesting that David Fincher's story with Alien 3 was kind of very similar, where it was kind of his first big foray into like Hollywood filmmaking, and his experience is not great, but then he bounces back and has this tremendously critically well received career in the aftermath of it. So interesting to see that kind of happen back to back with these guys.
Well, again, this might be, like tinfoil hat stuff. I've got nothing to really back this up except like kind of a gut feeling. But I said back on our Alien 3 episode that I kind of got the feeling that the producers of this franchise, which have been involved since the beginning for the most part, and were involved with the writing and creative process of 3, I felt like they hired David Fincher as, quote, just a music video director, as someone that they feel like they could, whatever the nice way of walking all over is, someone they could just put as like a placeholder while they kind of direct from behind the scenes. Right. And I feel like they might have tried it again here. Like, hey, let's get this foreign film director's first Hollywood director job, and we can sort of have more influence, because obviously that wasn't happening in those first two movies. I mean, it was early in Ridley Scott's career, but Alien wasn't Alien at that time.
Right.
And then Aliens, you got James Cameron, who again, early in his career, but those are both massive directors and personalities. And it almost felt like for these sequels, those producers really wanted to get more in, like on the creative side, and maybe reached out for some left field picks for directors. Again, nothing to back that up. I got no sources for that. It's just kind of a feeling that I get looking at the track record here.
And I don't think that's actually that tinfoil of a theory, and I actually don't even think it's inherently like a disrespectful thing, especially if it's a franchise where you feel like you have an idea. And I don't think in most of these cases the journeyman directors are being... A journeyman director is kind of how I kind of view that, where it's somebody who's a perfectly solid hand that is brought in to basically just see something through to completion. But like I said, the thing they didn't really count on is that Jean-Pierre and David Fincher were both guys that turned out to be not journeyman directors. They're directors that have very specific visions and very specific ideas of how they want their movies to be. And the Alien franchise at that time at least, was not really the place for that. They, I think, had ideas of what they wanted these movies to kind of be, and I think that caused a lot of conflict. But needless to say, like we said, both went on to have perfectly successful, well-acclaimed careers, both still working today. Jean-Pierre just had a movie released by Netflix this year, earlier, and we know David Fincher is out there still doing his thing as well.
He's doing a lot of things that aren't called Mindhunter, and I'm getting kind of sick of it. All right, let's jump into this one, Andrew. Let's cross the threshold. Moving forward, all positive vibes, baby. Positive thoughts on Alien Resurrection.
Hashtag PP.
"200 years after Ellen Ripley's death, a team of military scientists aboard a spaceship successfully make a clone known as Ripley 8, complete with an alien queen that they intend to use as a weapon. After a group of mercenaries deliver live bodies to the ship to be used as alien hosts, the fresh xenomorph aliens escape confinement and begin hunting down both their military captors and the ship's visitors. When the survivors realize that Ripley 8 possesses enhanced strength and special abilities thanks to her hybrid DNA, they trust in her to lead them to safety. When their escape seems imminent, the remaining passengers face one last threat in the form of a new hybrid alien birthed from the queen that contains human features." Kind of gross, Andrew. It gets kind of gross at the end, doesn't it? He's nodding his head, folks. He's nodding his head emphatically.
The alien human hybrid at the end of this movie is like a deep. It's a very strange, uncanny valley. Like, obviously, it's an alien and it looks kind of like an alien, but then it also doesn't. And it also is just very. It's just very deeply unsettling to me. Like the ending. Sorry, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll get back to that later, but yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny because all the aliens we've seen, except for Alien 3, are human hybrids. I mean, that's kind of what an alien is. It's taking on some of the DNA from its host, but this is like to the extreme. This is like more. I think it's the color, because all xenomorphs are gooey, but they're black and gooey. So there's like shiny black. This one being like white and gooey, it just looks gross.
Oh my god. Yeah. Ugh.
Imagine how it smells, Andrew.
Don't do that to me.
Freshly birthed. Okay, let's jump into the cast.
Stop it. Chris, stop.
Let's talk about the cast of this film, starting with the high point, the best casting, best performance of the movie. Every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty. They elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, go ahead and kick us off. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for Alien Resurrection?
I'm again going straight to the top, and I'm giving it to Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley to date her last on-screen performance as Ellen Ripley.
Asterisk. Ripley 8. Ellen Ripley with black fingernails.
But no, so she's cast with an interesting spot to sit here, where she's playing Ripley but also not playing Ripley. The idea is that this is obviously Ripley 8, so there is a clone. There apparently were 7 previous attempts to clone Ripley. We see most of them in a lab
7,
at one
you're
point.
Sure about that, Andrew? There's 7 before?
1, 2, 3.
You hesitate. There was 6 up there. I was just making sure we got the math right.
6 to 7, and then she's 8. Yes, 7 before this. Okay. But we see most of them at one point. She actually does play Ripley 7 briefly, and it's another deeply, deeply unsettling scene.
Yes.
But it's but so she's tasked with writing that weird line of trying to make it kind of familiar, but also make it kind of, if you will, alien. And I think she does a great job at that. So there's definitely a familiarity. She's got memories of these things that are fragmented, but the idea being that by being a clone and having now influenced the alien DNA the same way that the alien DNA is now influencing her, as there is a genetic memory in the aliens, her actual memories are now getting passed down to a clone through genetics versus just straight, knowledge transfer. But it's a really complicated way of just saying she remembers some of the events from the previous movies. But like I said, I think she rides that line really well. She obviously gets to be cool. She gets to be tough. She gets to keep fighting the aliens. The finale of this movie does play it a little bit differently. And I think that's interesting, where we're not just watching another kind of big brawl fight. And like I said, I think she just does a great job. I think she fills the role as it needs to be for this movie very well. She gets to stand toe-to-toe with most of the kind of seedier characters that this movie is kind of inhabited by. And she stands up to all of them. No issue. And she's Sigourney Weaver. She's awesome.
She's Sigourney Weaver. She's also getting my Mark Strong award. I mean, I was sitting here and I was hesitating and I considered someone else. We'll talk about him. But I can't deny it. It's Sigourney Weaver. She is working in this movie. She's working her tail off. And she has a very wide range. It's not the same Ellen Ripley performance that we've seen before. Obviously, she's a clone. She's part alien. She's different. And she's also like an infant. I mean, she's like brand new to this world. So she's still looking at things very intensely, like studying them and kind of figuring out the world around her. Mm-hmm. And she has these extra abilities. And she's just very odd. But also still manages to get like emotional moments and performances, and we'll talk about that more in the scenes. But like the finale and the scene with Ripley 7, like it goes places that you wouldn't expect whenever you hear like, oh, Ellen Ripley's a clone and she's super powerful now. She's part alien now, but still manages to get very human emotions out of it. And she's so badass. I mean, she's surrounded by all these, Ron Perlman and big dudes and this big cast, but like always you're like, no, that woman right there is the most powerful being on that ship and on that set in real life, I would say. Andrew, did you know that Sigourney Weaver is not the name that she was born with?
I probably did, but you know what, Chris? Take us on a journey.
Let's go on this journey. Here's what I find interesting. I mean, stage names are very common, but Sigourney is not a stage name. She chose that name for herself when she was 14 years old, before she was an actress, before she was famous at all. She got it from The Great Gatsby, like a minor character in The Great Gatsby is named Sigourney. She liked the name. She didn't like being called, I think her birth name is Susan, and people called her Susie, and she didn't like it. And she decided at 14 years old she's going to go by Sigourney. She told her parents, she told her teachers, and she decided that for herself. And I think that is so badass and so on brand for Sigourney Weaver. And I love that something that she did, way before. She wasn't thinking like, oh, this is a cool stage name. This is going to be my actress name. She's like, in real life, she chose that identity for herself. I think that's badass. I love this woman.
That is pretty awesome. Gotta agree.
And pretty progressive when you consider like the how old she is now, when she was born, and when she was 14, making that kind of decision. Kind of ahead of her time.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's move through the rest of this cast. We have Winona Ryder as Anna Lee Kaw. And spoilers, she's an android.
What?
Isn't it funny that virtually every alien movie, there's going to be one android, and it's like a mystery. It's like who it's going to be. I mean, at least, the first one is a big twist. In the second one, they tell you like from the beginning, it's going to be an android. But by the time you get to 4, it comes back to being like, it's supposed to be a mystery. It's just kind of like a fun running gag in the franchise.
Yeah, they like to play have a little bit of fun with guessing who's the android.
This is certainly a different take on androids up to this point. I mean, her purpose and her abilities and the way she acts is not in line with what we've seen previously, so it's kind of cool to see a different take on it, especially since this is hundreds of years in the future. Things have obviously changed by then, but I really enjoy Winona Ryder in anything that she's in. This is no different. A very unique actress, a very unique presence. It makes a lot of sense to cast her as an android. And I hope that it sounds like some kind of backward compliment. I just think she's good at playing a character that's a little bit off.
I agree. And you even see this, I think, with even her stuff on recently on Stranger Things. I think she still gets to kind of play into that kind of character who's just a little, like I said, there's just that little thing. And this is still when she's kind of at her initial stardom. She obviously does have her issues that she was able to overcome, both health related and personal. This kind of comes not quite at the end of that first run, but it's still a high profile role. And obviously she was, I think, a great pick for this. Like I said, as far as, again, kind of creating that kind of performance that, again, when you look at the character straight on, you're like, oh yeah, she's just a member of this crew. She's there. But when you do look a little bit deeper, you again can see that there's just something slightly off that ultimately manifests in her being the android in this movie. I think it's done very well, especially that reveal. I think that reveal is done in a very cool way. But yeah, she's great.
Dominique Pinon. I'm not going to try to say this name with a French accent. This is a French actor, and I'm always horrified at butchering these names. Dominique Pignon, I think, is an okay way to say it, even though there's supposed to be a fancy accent on that. I apologize, Dominique. But they play the character Dom Freeze, one of those mercenaries that I mentioned in the synopsis, who is wheelchair bound, and it is definitely a standout performance, definitely memorable, definitely Dominique is making some decisions with this performance and his cadence and the way he carries himself. A frequent collaborator of our director, obviously he brought him on board. One of the few things that he did bring on creatively to this movie, and like I said, it's a small part. You can't really point to that one key moment in the plot where he comes through, but constant presence through most of this movie and memorable performance.
I agree. Yeah, he's worked with Jean-Pierre, I think, 8 times before this and after this. So just him bringing on one of his kind of frequent collaborators, every director's got him. But yeah, he's got in it. He plays a disabled character on this crew, and that factors into the plot in a variety of different ways. But like I said, he makes the most out of all the scenes that he's got. He creates a memorable performance, and he's up to the task of standing toe to toe with some of these potentially more well-known American actors.
Actors like Ron Perlman, that's truly one of a kind, plays Ron Johnner. Ron plays Ron. And boy, this is a weird performance, even for Ron Perlman.
It's
I think his first line of the movie is bark, 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 bark. But
yeah, it's like baboon barking noises or dog noises or something. It's so weird.
So strange. Do you think this is what Guillermo saw when he's like, "Oh, that's my Hellboy. That's my giant ape-like monster"?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a weird one. He's a jerk to just about everybody. Gets his little redemption moment towards the end, and it's nothing if not memorable. Andrew.
Yeah, he's another guy that I don't know if understood the assignment is the right way to put it, but he's definitely making the most out of what he's got here. Plays, like I said, he starts off as playing kind of pretty squarely an unlikable character.
The first thing he does is drop a knife into Dom's leg because he can't feel it because he's paralyzed.
Right, and you're like at very few moments through the first half of the movie did they make any attempts to make this character likable. He is kind of deeply unlikable pretty much the entire movie. Until towards the end, he kind of starts, once our team gets to bond and kind of work together and kind of have to kind of, we start sharing trauma that brings everyone together. Once you start fighting aliens, and you got to overcome that. But I mean, he's Ron Perlman, so he's making the most out of every single thing he's got. He is up to the task, and he's Ron Perlman. I mean, you can't go wrong there.
Who else could deliver the line? You hang with us for a while, you'll find out I am not the man with whom to fuck.
Fantastic. Beautiful.
Michael Wincott plays Frank Elgin. who's the captain of this team of mercenaries, and I like this performance, but I like this role because it looks like, like he's the captain, he's the main guy of this group of mercenaries, and also ends up being the first to die from that group. Dies pretty early in this movie, after the movie is kind of setting it up like he's going to be a major player, and I like that subversion. I like that little twist. He does a good job of selling us on him being like the big bad guy potentially of the movie, and then he gets axed. But definitely a journeyman actor, definitely been in a million things you've probably seen. Roles throughout the 90s and 2000s, movies like The Doors and The Crow. A face you've probably seen, and does a good job here.
Yeah, I mean, The Crow, he's basically the main villain of The Crow, which is kind of my barometer for this. So again, you're kind of right where you're setting him. I'm like, oh, the bad guy from The Crow. He's, I'm going to wait for him to be the bad guy here. And no, he actually, like I said, he kind of very unceremoniously is killed pretty early on. He's actually a pretty bit player in this movie in the grand scheme of things. But he is, he's kind of a bad guy. I mean, he's bringing, he's selling the cryostasis humans to the generals at this facility. So, he's not great. I'm not saying the alien did us a favor, but when you start selling humans, you're a bad person.
Andrew, maybe it's a hot take, but I agree that selling humans is bad.
Yeah, if it's one thing we can all agree on.
Dan Hedaya plays General Perez, who is obviously a top-ranking officer on this military ship, and also a bad guy, because he's the one that brings on these mercenaries to feed the Xenomorph's hosts with these live humans that he's buying from them. And look, it's a good performance. This man, these eyebrows. Let's start with the eyebrows. They rival Eugene Levy as far as just sheer volume, and the faces that he can make, and does make. There's parts where he's like looking through like the glass to look at the Xenomorphs, and it's like a fisheye lens on him, and he is just almost comical, and I think that's very intentional. And I can't quite put my finger on like what I know him from. He's been in a million stuff. I mean, stuff I've certainly seen. Commando, The Addams Family, Rookie of the Year. Is that what I'm thinking of? Because he has a comedic chops and a comedic face, and very, very animated expressions, and the insane amount of body hair helps with that. There's a shot where he's like in his bunks and he's got just a tank top on, but it looks like he's wearing a sweater. It is wild. And maybe I'm talking too much about this man's hair, but it is first thing I noticed. But I enjoyed seeing him here. I enjoyed he has a pretty fun death scene where he gets to use one of his very animated shocked faces, and it was fun. It was good stuff.
Yeah, he's had bit parts in The Usual Suspects. He was in Mulholland Drive. I know he's Clueless. He plays Alicia Silverstone's dad. That's a big thing that I remember him from. Been all over the place. I mean, still working pretty much to this day. I think he's still showing up on television shows and other stuff. So, obviously kind of a journeyman actor, but yeah, here he's basically tasked with being our kind of, if there is a Paul Reiser type character of this movie, it's this guy. Because he's basically the guy he authorized the clones of Ripley. He wants the aliens for, like he even says at one point in the movie, he's like, Ellen Ripley has made it her life's goal to eradicate the world's existence of these things, and I really don't want her to do that again. So he's like dead set on these aliens being a thing, and has no desire to see her do it again. So he's trying to kind of keep this Ripley experiment in isolation, while also still trying to breed these aliens and getting his new, getting this, whatever the government's plans are. Also, he's in Night at the Roxbury. I don't know if that's what you might be remembering him from.
I don't know.
Who knows?
I'll see
anyway,
it one day. I'll 3 years from now, I'll rewatch it. That's what I know him from.
Anyway, he's great here. He's also in the movie Dick, where he literally plays Richard Nixon.
I'm familiar with that movie, but that's not what I'm thinking of.
None of this is helping. I'm just breaking up my own conversation.
I feel like he plays like this isn't it, but like in Hot Shots Part Duh, they have Saddam Hussein, but they have obviously a comedic actor playing like a parody of him. I feel like he's a parody of a bad guy in another movie, but I can't put my finger on it. But if it comes to me, I'll let everyone know, and we can all breathe a sigh of relief. And you know what I've realized, Adrian, watching these and kind of revisiting these Alien films in this franchise, is that Alien is like the exact opposite of Star Trek. Star Trek is like, in the future, humans will reach an almost utopia. We will realize the true value and band together and invest in science in the interest of knowledge. And Alien is like, what if more capitalism? What if capitalism takes over the universe? Man. What if it's all military and money? What if that's what everything is about?
What if it never gets better? Oh man, yeah. It is. This movie, the Alien movies are. It's something that's interesting because the first one is kind of a very isolated, almost haunted house type movie, and then the second one kind of exchanges that for kind of the straight action set pieces that James Cameron has kind of become known for. But 3 and 4 are just these very bleak movies at times. They're just very, very like dark. 3 definitely more so, but 4 kind of veers in that same territory of like just very bleak. The end of this movie tries to end on a relative high note, but just so like it just really leans into that whole everything is hopeless.
Yes.
It's just like, okay, cool, great. Never try. You'll always fail. You can die and they'll still bring you back just to have more aliens.
So here's an actor that I was considering for the Mark Strong Award. Ultimately, just the screen time is kind of what made me, I gotta stick with Sigourney, but Brad Dourif plays Dr. Gettman.
The man.
So one of the scientists responsible for successfully cloning Ripley and is clearly obsessed with the Xenomorphs. It's a thread that's kind of in the background. He looks at them longingly, like through the glass. He sort of takes pleasure in like torturing them and trying to train them. And then there's a moment where it seems, I'll just say it, a bit sexual, his attraction to these aliens. It's very weird and creepy and unnerving. And I don't know if I wish there was more of that, but it doesn't really factor into the plot. If he was like the one that intentionally released them or he got more obsessed with them, like I think there could have been something more interesting there, and maybe I would have went for him the Mark Strong Award. But with the screen time that he does have, because he does die relatively early, all things considered, he makes a very memorable performance.
He does.
As just this creepy scientist, and I recognize his face, but I didn't know exactly where I knew him from. But unlike Dan Hedaya there, I do know now why I know him. He plays Billy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is...
Yes, he does.
Basically, it's essentially his first film. I looked at Wikipedia, made a point to be like, well, actually, he was in another movie before that was never released. So come on, that doesn't count. His first movie...
That doesn't count at all.
Is Billy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is one of the best movies of all time. One of my personal favorites. I cannot praise that movie enough. If you've never seen it, it's one of those movies like you have to see before you die. It is so good. Probably my favorite Jack Nicholson performance. It's got a lot of stuff going for it. But the character of Billy is very memorable and very important in that movie. And I guess I won't spoil a nearly 50-year-old movie, but go and see it. His performance is very memorable, and again in that movie, he's not like unnerving and weird like he is here, but it's definitely abnormal, and he does have very specific choices that he makes as an actor that all works very, very well, and it's just incredible. He was nominated, I believe, for an Oscar in his very first movie, and
Citizen Kane'd himself.
Yeah, well, he's had a very successful career. Still working like everyone else we've been talking about here. He was the sheriff in the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, something a little bit more recent. So still out there, still doing his thing. But man, what a great character actor! A very memorable performance here, even if it is, screen time wise, pretty small.
Yeah, I mean, he's been everywhere. I mean, he's probably not necessarily known, but for a lot of people, he's been the voice of Chucky since 1988. So he's been doing that for a very long time. Like you said, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest right out the gate. Another one he's in pretty early on is Eyes of Laura Mars, which is an early effort co-written by John Carpenter. starring Faye Dunaway and Tommy Lee Jones in 1978. So it's a very strange thing where you see young Tommy Lee Jones and you realize how much he just looks the same. And he had a bunch of collaborations with David Lynch. He was the Mentat in Dune. He showed up in Blue Velvet. He has a fairly memorable performance in The Exorcist 3 where he plays the Gemini killer. I actually think I've talked before, I'm sure. Don't know if necessarily on the show about how I think The Exorcist 3 is super underrated.
Shut up about it. Every
I know.
episode.
He plays
Exorcist 3.
Exorcist every episode now. We get it. Shows up in The Two Towers, plays Grima Wormtongue. So he's everywhere. He's all over the place, still working today. As far as I know, still voicing Chucky in the television show that's ongoing right now. So he's still out there doing his thing.
Today I learned there's a Chucky television show. I did not know.
Chucky is actually an interesting thing where I hear that franchise has been relatively consistent. It seems to be aware of what it is and goes with it. There's a few installments I have friends that are like, yeah, those ones are a little rough, but by and large, people seem to say that franchise is relatively consistent. I've never dived into it. Maybe I have to. But either way.
I know that Mark Hamill did the voice of that reboot they did recently.
The reboot,
right?
yeah, the reboot, because it's one of those weird situations where the original movie has like a separate copyright from the franchise somehow.
Yeah,
the original script. It's very much like that James Bond situation with Spectre and Thunderball, where the rights to Spectre were technically owned by somebody that didn't own the rest of the James Bond rights. That's how they were able to
Halloween is broken up in a few different sections.
So you get weird things like that, but apparently Child's Play is kind of like that. But and I heard the reboot was perfectly fine. But he's still out there doing Chucky, and so Chucky has got to be pretty consistent. It's definitely as far as being portrayed by the same person. But then he was also in Myst 3, the video game. So Brad Dourif is everywhere.
Done it all.
He's done it all. There is nothing he has not done. But either way, here, like you said, he gets taken off the board pretty early on, but he does come back later, and kind of brings his weird.
He does, had that key scene later.
He does have that key scene where like he kind of brings his kind of. It's the closest you get to any kind of resolution to his weird, almost fetish for these aliens that he has. Where just the notion of their idea of like genetic superiority and all of that is just something I think that just appeals to him as a scientist in this movie, and it's very unsettling. Like I said, if he was in this movie more, it probably wouldn't. He definitely would have been in the running for Mark Strong, but he's one of those castings that you're kind of waiting for it to go wrong because he's Brad Dourif. You're just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And
if you told me like Crispin Glover was considered for this part, I would not be surprised whatsoever.
Oh, not at all. It's that kind of thing. And like I said, you may not necessarily be shocked that it turns out that he's more on the sides of the alien than anything else, but it really doesn't matter. And it's kind of known relatively, but he's definitely an interesting take on this. Somebody who's kind of because you get that very kind of cold, analytic military stance of these aliens are worthwhile to have because of how dangerous they are, and how they could be used in military applications. Because if you've got a place and you want to wipe out everybody that's there, just release the aliens and they'll wipe out everybody that's there without caring because they don't care. They're just predators. Which we'll talk about more next week. But it's. But this is a different instance where, and they've kind of played with this a little bit, but you get somebody who's just, it's not so much how dangerous or anything like that. It's like just a genuine, like you said, it's an unsettling, almost obsession with what these things are, what they're capable of, their kind of place in the structure of, the animal kingdom, however you want to view it. And it was definitely a different take on that whole thing, taken to a very different extreme, and Brad Dourif is definitely the guy to do that. So, fantastic choice.
Let's round out the cast with this. Leland Orser plays Larry Purvis. This is another character actor, another journeyman actor, another man. You see his face, you see him in 5 different things, whether you realize it or not. In this movie, he plays one of the stolen bodies that is chosen to be host to the aliens, and he does not initially know he has an alien inside of him, and they try to bring him along to make the escape from the ship. Ultimately, he falls victim to the old chest burster. But very memorable performance, very memorable character, very memorable scene where Ripley is explaining to him that the line they used in the beginning of the show, there's a monster inside of him, and it's going to burst out and kill him. Very matter-of-factly, how she explains it to him. But I like this guy. I like him freaking out, saying, "What's inside me?" It's one of the more
like
memorable
at the slow
parts
descent.
of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Credits include Independence Day, The Bone Collector, Pearl Harbor, like I said, all over the place. Plenty of high-profile stuff. Definitely memorable here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's like I said, if you see this guy's face, you'll definitely recognize him. He's been on a ton of television shows, has guest starred on a whole bunch of things, has been played one of Liam Neeson's associates in all of the Taken movies, Runaway Jury, Saving Private Ryan. I mean, everywhere. Escape from L.A. I mean, Seven, just all over the place. You've seen this guy, you've seen his face. But yeah, he's again brought in late stage here. He's one of the only people that survived or still alive after the kind of people got fed to the aliens. And yeah, gets some memorable scenes. Has a really, really gnarly death scene. I gotta say, it's pretty cool what he ends up doing. He ends up basically he kind of gets behind one of the bad scientists and just lets the chest burster go straight out of his body through that dude's head, and I was like, that's rad.
That's a cool, I mean, you're in the fourth Alien movie, and we've seen the cycle so many times with the face hugger to the chest burster, and like, the idea to weaponize the chest burster is a very clever sort of twist on something we've seen a bunch of times by this point in the franchise. I like that a lot too.
Yeah. But yeah, he, like I said, makes the most out of what he's got.
Well, it's time, Andrew. Let's jump into the scenes of this film.
Do you mind if I shout out? You mind if I shout out just a couple more people real quick?
I do. We're on a tight schedule here. Andrew, this is our show. We can do whatever we want. Shout them out.
You're right. So these guys are all kind of in the movie, but I do want to call out Raymond Cruz, who plays DeStefano. He's one of the members of the. He's one of the soldiers who, when everything kind of goes wrong, actually teams up with the crew. But you've seen Raymond Cruz is another one that you've seen in a variety of different things. He's in Under Siege. He's in Clear and Present Danger. But he's in The Rock. He's one of the sergeants and the military guys in that. But he's just got a bit part here, but gets actually a lot of people probably know him most as Tuco Salamanca from Breaking Bad. That was a more recent high-profile thing that he had. But just a bit part here. But just thought it was a good performance. Again, kind of seeing that switch that comes in when the aliens break out, and suddenly we're all on the same side because we're just trying to survive.
Yep. Good shout out, Andrew. Anyone else we missed?
There's just two others. J.E. Friedman plays the other kind of scientist who's not quite as obsessed with them as our boy Brad Dourif is, but he definitely has his part kind of in the finale, kind of trying to get in our hero's way and trying to kind of stop them. Kind of wants to leave them behind and save himself, and ends up being kind of the main human antagonist of the latter part of the film. And
he's the one that gets chest bursted, right?
Yes, through his head. Yes, he's that one. So you got to shout out that, because that's gnarly. Rest in peace to J.E. Friedman. He passed away many years ago from AIDS, or complications from AIDS, and
R.I.P.
But yeah, he again, another kind of being a gross scientist, and then gets to take part in one of the gnarly death scenes. So you can't go wrong. All right, now I'm done.
All right, Andrew, let's jump into the scenes, specifically the best scenes of the movie, the high points. In your opinion, when is this film firing on all cylinders, and what is the best scene in Alien Resurrection?
I am not gonna, in a bit of a twist from me, I'm not gonna be going with the finale of the film, which tends to kind of be where I really think these movies all hit their high gear. But I'm actually gonna go with that scene we mentioned earlier, kind of the Brad Dourif's return scene, where the kind of alien hybrid is birthed out of the Alien Queen, and Ripley is kind of a reference to this. I think this is a very interesting scene and kind of sets us up for a kind of flip of the script of how these finales typically go, because it's usually this kind of all-out rampage as the aliens kind of descend and we're kind of all fighting to survive. But in this case, we get an interesting wrinkle with this alien hybrid. So this scene that I liked is the scene where it's basically revealed. Because throughout this movie, we know there was an alien queen taken out of Ripley, but we know that there's been this exchange of DNA, seemingly, where the alien has picked up some human traits, and then obviously Ripley has picked up some alien traits, such as the acid blood, things like that. But this scene is kind of the culmination of that, where we've had the chest bursters. Obviously, it has laid the eggs in a traditional sense. But in this scene, the alien queen basically gives birth to the
Humalian.
The Humalian. And it is again another scene that is kind of deeply unsettling.
Yes.
The whole time this birth is happening, though, Brad Dourif is like speaking about like the genetic superiority of these things, how Ripley relates to them, how she's given them kind of the ultimate missing piece of the puzzle, where the alien can basically no longer needs hosts. The alien can give birth to its own kind. It no longer needs the middle ground. And it is this kind of big, almost Shakespearean level type speech where he's really building up and creating this real dramatic tension around it. And then it results in this alien hybrid being born. And as we mentioned, this alien hybrid is deeply unsettling in its appearance. But the first thing it does essentially is kills its own mother and then recognizes Ripley as its mother. Again, kind of further flipping the script on what we're expecting here and kind of taking us into some really unknown territory. But just the way this is all laid out, the sequence of events as they happen, Brad Dourif in the background kind of giving it that, dare I say, gravitas?
Gravitas.
Kind of leading up to ultimately the hybrid alien killing the alien queen and kind of Ripley escaping to kind of get us through this. I think for me, it's probably when I think the ideas kind of all come into fruition. Like I said, you kind of get a resolution to Brad Dourif's place in this and how he views these things. You get the reveal of our ultimate kind of alien villain. And then you kind of get the flip of the script and the realization that this is not what we think it is.
It's a good pick. It's definitely unique to this movie. It's the kind of scene that you wouldn't see in any other alien movie. Not just a lot of these scenes you wouldn't see in any other alien movie because of the tone or what have you, but what defines these aliens is their breeding cycle, and now we have a queen alien giving birth. We have a whole new alien type, the Humalian, trademark, patent pending.
Yeah.
But it is unique. It's one of the first scenes that I think of when I think of this movie, and like you said, it really flips the script, because now in the finale, I mean, previously to this, no one has hated xenomorphs more than Ellen Ripley, especially by the time you get to like Alien 3.
Mm-hmm.
And now she still wants to make the escape along with the survivors, but she doesn't want to kill the alien because she also feels that kinship, and it leads to the scene where obviously she does kill the little baby, and it's quite hard for her to do, but it starts here with this scene that you're talking about here, and this gross new Humalian that you mentioned. Kind of looks like Kraid from the Metroid series, if you ever played
a little bit. Yeah, my God. But yeah, it's just a very
belly.
It's a very weird scene, but like you said, it's unique, and it kind of stands out to me because of that, where I just genuinely had to be like, wow, this is memorable. It's one of the scenes in the movie that is definitely stuck in my head most after watching it. So I gotta go with that. Obviously, Sigourney Weaver kind of being horrified at what she's witnessing definitely adds to it. And so it's just a great work by everybody involved.
Good pick, Andrew. I am going to take this in a different direction. My favorite scene in this movie is when I think the movie does the best job of building tension in its action. And look, hashtag positivity podcast. I'm not going to sit here and convince you that this is an underrated gem and it's actually great and we all got it wrong. Andrew, this movie It has its problems. It's not what we're diving
Yes, it
into,
does.
but ultimately, yeah, it's a rough one. But this scene that I'm gonna highlight here, I think works top to bottom, 100%, and is a genuinely great alien action scene. It is whenever they're making their escape, they're trying to get to the escape pod, and the ship is being destroyed, and the route has to take them through a flooded kitchen. And the scene is great because they set up the stakes so well. The jerk scientist that we mentioned earlier, it kind of ends up betraying all the humans. Tells them it's X number of meters across this kitchen. Is that the distance? Are you sure? Yeah, yeah. So it is a long underwater swim. They know it's going to be like holding our breaths for a long time. They know it's already risky, and they all dive underwater. And then what follows behind them? An alien underwater. Again, something we've never seen before. An alien swimming underwater. They look totally different when they're free to sort of move about underwater. They swim very fast, and the tension is very high because we know even in movies, you can't hold your breath forever. They hold it for a pretty long time in this movie, but you get that tension that you've got to make it across this flooded kitchen. It's very claustrophobic because the water is going all the way to the ceiling, and then you've got aliens chasing behind them. And the reveal of the alien is great because Dom, our paralyzed character, is strapped to the back of one of the other characters. And he is the first one to see the alien. He's got to warn everybody else, and they turn around and they shoot their Ron Perlman shoots his underwater bullet, blows one of them up. Another person falls victim to another alien that's down there. It's great. It's just good tension, good action scene. And then they finally make it to the end of the underwater segment, and there's like what would you call it? It's a film on top of the water from the queen building her nest. So they're pushing up on this barrier. They can't quite get to air.
Membrane, if you will.
Membrane. That's a good word, Andrew. Yeah. So they got to like break through the membrane to finally get that deep breath of air, and it's good, very satisfying like end to this little segment here. And
only to find out.
The scene continues in this next scene. We'll go ahead and talk about it, but I want to highlight the underwater segment as my favorite action scene because it ramps up that tension so well. But yeah, they finally make it out of this membrane. They got to climb up a ladder, and the alien's still hot on their tail. And this leads into another great action scene with them climbing up the ladder with the alien climbing after them. And they just do a lot of really smart, clever stuff here. Again, we have a Dom, our paralyzed character, shooting the alien, and then he switches places with the man whose back he is strapped to, and he grabs onto the ladder, and they switch, and now they're the one shooting after the alien, and they end up sacrificing themselves in a very dramatic way. Ron Perlman also gets some good action here, and he does something that I like. He, Andrew, this is a deep cut for our own podcast. We've talked about the term "save the cat" and how it applies to cinema, and that first Alien movie is obviously a great example of it. And if you remember on our Constantine episode, we talked about smoking the spider, where Keanu Reeves blows smoke into this glass and traps a spider underneath it, and it tells us a lot about Keanu Reeves. Ron Perlman sees a spider just hanging out on the web, and he holds up a gun to it, and he blasts it away. And that makes me like the character more, because I am not a fan of spiders, and I was actively cheering during that scene. I don't know what it's supposed to tell you about his character, but I was glad that made it into the film. That was a fun little touch.
You could definitely say he smoked that spider.
Hey. Yeah, but just a long extended chase scene, essentially. And I think it's done very well, top to bottom. And again, the point of our podcast is to highlight things like this. I will agree with you if you say that this is the low point of the franchise, but I will disagree if you say there's no redeeming factors, because this scene works 100%. It's very well done.
I agree. This is actually, like I said, it's actually kind of two chase sequences back to back, because the first one is them going through the water, then the second one is them trying to get up through this thing. I don't know if they've ever really explained what it is exactly that the aliens do. Obviously it's their nest, but this substance in this thing they do where they kind of cover the whole walls, ceiling, floor with this kind of material. It's a very strange thing that I don't know if they've ever actually explained what it is or what they're doing.
explained in Aliens, because they surround the area where the queen is, and they put live people in there so that when the eggs burst, they have a host to immediately.
I just mean the literal stuff that's on the walls that the aliens create.
Yeah,
like
it's where you stick the humans.
But yeah, we don't know where it comes from. That's my question. Like, I understand
Andrew,
it's
I see.
Chris.
You want to see what body part the alien secretes this substance from? That's what you want to see on film?
Well, I just want to get confirmation that is in fact what's happening. But I don't need to see it. I just want to know that's what's happening.
See, they have this gland under their tail.
Yeah, when a female alien loves a human very much. But yeah. So you get these kind of back-to-back sequences that I think are very cool. We do lose a lot of people in these sequences. We get whittled down. I think it's literally just Ripley, Call, Johnner, and maybe Dom that kind of come out of this, all still alive. I think Stefano is still there too, but we lose a lot of people here between the water chase and this one, and it's it's great. It's kind of like definitely the action peak of the movie, but as we've established, the climax of this film is not like an action sequence in like the classic sense of the term. So this is definitely the kind of high moment for action, I think. And I agree generally. I'm not going to tell you this is a lost gem and people are sleeping on Alien Resurrection, but there is definitely, like you said, it's definitely a weird spot for this director. But I think if you watch his other work and you do watch this, I think you're going to see some hallmarks. I think you'll see him trying to do some of the things that he's known for. And I agree.
It's a good bit with a character call, Winona Ryder's character, because this is how you find out she is an android, because there's a very dramatic scene where when they get double-crossed, she gets shot in the stomach and she falls into the water. Again, very dramatically, slow motion. She's presumed dead. And this very scene ends with Winona Ryder opening the door to let them out. Like in the very same scene, she comes right back, and then we find out that she is a robot. And Andrew, we talked previously on our podcast about android and droid and robot and what the difference is between all of these. And I've got a new word that I learned from this from this movie, because she refers to herself as an automaton, which is a robot that's made by other robots.
Well, that's interesting.
Look at that. So you have an android, which I think an android we determined it's like humanoid. It kind of passes as a human. That's what makes it an android. But if that is made by other robots, then it is an automaton. So
interesting.
Our sci-fi lore deepens.
We're continuing on. I do like how Ripley's relationship with androids evolves over these movies. I think it's actually interesting, and this is actually I'm sure part of it was intentional. I can't speak to how much of it was, but in that first movie, when Ian Holmes' character Ash is revealed to be an android, which is not known at that, like throughout most of that movie, like you don't know that he's the android, and you only find that out basically when he gets attacked and like revealed, and that's when you find out that he's had his ulterior motives going on, and he's been kind of working against the crew this whole time.
You find out when he's bleeding milk.
Yeah, basically. Oh man. But either way, that kind of builds this deep distrust of androids in Ripley, which is elaborated on at the beginning of Aliens, where she finds out that Bishop is an android, and she's very weary of him, and spends the whole movie not really trusting this guy. And then at the end, she actually thinks that he has abandoned them. Turns out to be incorrect, and realizes that he did in fact come back to save the day. And then his brief scene in Alien 3 shows that there actually was kind of a kinship formed between Ripley and Bishop. She saw Bishop as somebody that was, on her side and somebody that she could confide in. And at the end, when he kind of asks, he's like, "Shut me down. I don't want to feel." He's like, "I'd rather be nothing than feel this." Like, you can tell that there's some sadness on her part, because she knows that she's kind of closing down the last thing she has from that experience, which she thought was ending on a very happy note and is now nothing. To this, where she is essentially acting as a maternal figure to Call at this point by the end of this movie. Because Call is herself very distrustful of Ripley early on, thinking that she is, she's part alien. She can't be trusted. She's one of those things, and she's going to turn on us. But it kind of evolves at the end to it being kind of a maternal relationship, whereas they kind of end in their kind of new start at the end of this movie. I just think it's a very interesting arc for the character to go straight from distrust to essential, at minimum, kind of a mentorship role, and at most, kind of taking on that maternal role.
Yeah, she's got a great line whenever they're talking, and she finds out she's an android. Ripley says, "I should have known. No human being is that humane." That's a pretty cool line, because she is the one that is focused on, let's save as many people as possible. She doesn't want to leave the guy behind that has an alien inside of her. She is committed to saving as many humans and eradicating these aliens. And she's also very matter of fact whenever she asks her, like, why is this your cause? She's like, well, it's what I was programmed to do. She's like, very realistic about why she quote unquote feels the way she does. It's what her programming is telling her.
Yep.
So we talked on Alien 3 about how, even though that is not the most highly praised Alien movie, it has some of the most iconic shots of the franchise, which is just funny that deep, the third movie, you get these super iconic shots. I would argue that Alien Resurrection has one of those scenes. The scene where Ripley 8 discovers Ripley 1 through 7, I think is a very famous scene, very well known, probably the most well-known scene from this movie. It's been
for sure.
parodied in particular a number of times, especially whenever she reaches Ripley 7, who is the closest to being fully formed, but is still very much deformed and has a horrible quality of life. And she's just laying there suffering on a table, and she pleads with her to kill me, please. And she, with tears in her eyes, takes her out with a flamethrower. And that specific scene, I've seen it parodied in South Park. I've seen the referenced a number of times. If someone says kill it with fire, they're either referencing that, they're referencing the thing. But it has its place in pop culture.
Sure.
And it's one of those scenes that, when we're talking about Ripley's performance, or Sigourney Weaver's performance, where I mentioned, like, she has her moments of, like, genuine, like, emotion and sadness, even though she's playing this different, type of creature, this clone. This is one of them. Like, her seeing these versions of her that are not fully formed, and they're suffering, and she has to destroy them all to release them from this prison that they're being held in. Like, it's as bizarre as it is, and as weird as all this stuff looks. Like, emotionally, it works and it lands.
I agree. I think, Sigourney Weaver does not take this lightly. You can, it's akin to something like, say, Bruce Willis's John McClane. Like, there's at bare minimum, there's this investment in the character and a desire to do the character justice. Even, like you said, as you get to the end and you feel like you might be getting to diminishing returns, there's still an investment from those people in playing this character. And if you're going to show up, giving it everything you have. And I think that's definitely true for Sigourney here. She's not phoning this in. She's showing up and manages, like you said, to make a lot of these moments hit in scenarios where they otherwise might not, by giving it that emotion, by giving it that investment. That scene with Ripley 7 is very heart-wrenching, and that's because Sigourney Weaver acting versus Sigourney Weaver. How can you go wrong? But
sure,
Sigourney Weaver twice. But yeah, it all works, and it's completely because of Sigourney Weaver.
There's some good comedy in this movie, some good jokes. Not going to sit here and tell you that every joke lands, every attempt lands, but there's certainly a few that I made a point to write down because they got a chuckle out of me. I really like when Ron Perlman is talking to Ripley and he says, "I heard you ran into these things before." She says, "That's right." And he says, "Wow, man. So, like, what did you do?" And she says, "I died."
Yeah.
Good stuff. And they make reference to that a few times. Like, she shows up and they go, "Oh, I thought you were dead." She's like, "Yeah, I get that a lot." I think that was actually used in the trailers. That line.
It was. I remember that because I remember seeing trailers for this movie. I don't remember watching it in theaters or anything, but I do remember seeing trailers for it and that line being in it. Yeah, there's definitely some good humor that does land here.
I like whenever Winona Ryder's character is drinking with the guys, and she takes a sip of the Ron Perlman like homemade stuff, and they imply it's very strong. They cut away to another scene, and then when they cut back, Winona Ryder just has big boxing gloves on, and she's trying to pick up the drink and have another sip, and she's obviously just like wasted. But just where do these gloves come from? Like the fact that they chose that to show that she's like inebriated, doubly weird because she's a robot and she's drunk. But still, the visual of her wearing these giant boxing gloves and trying to take a drink, that was funny.
I do think I got to shout out Ripley's basketball scene, which is
Yes.
just this and Escape from LA, man. Apparently basketball scenes were all the rage in the mid to late 90s. In
Just
your late
imagine
stage sequels.
the things they do with this character. Imagine like watching Alien in 1979, and then a time traveler shows up, and they don't show you the whole movie Alien Resurrection. They just show you the basketball scene. Like, imagine trying to connect the dots. So, like, this is the same character.
This is the same character. But yeah, apparently, the plan. That was apparently a scene that was going to be used to show off Ripley's new abilities. Apparently Weaver trained for like 10 days in order to try to be able to make this shot. And then they were concerned about the time being spent on it. It was going to take too long. And they were like, we could use trick shots to kind of show it. But Sigourney Weaver was apparently determined to make this shot on her own and make it authentic. And they apparently did dozens and dozens of takes where she missed all of them. And they basically finally genuinely got down to like the one last shot. And she got the ball in perfectly. So if you've heard she did that on the first shot, it's a lie. It's a myth. It's just one of those things. It was not. And then the ball, ironically enough, though, ends up going out of frame in the final shot. But it
could have been
shot.
fake.
It wasn't fake, though, because apparently in the shot, Ron, like, she sinks the basket, and then apparently, like, 2 seconds later, Ron Perlman goes, "Oh my God!" Like, just, and like almost ruins it because but apparently there's enough of a pause. They were able to use it. But just, yeah, so that basketball shot of Sigourney Weaver is in fact her making that shot on her own, under her own power. And we're just adding to how awesome Sigourney Weaver is.
She is. I wonder, she's 5'11". No, I was doing my little research on Sigourney Weaver. A tall woman.
Yes.
So I wonder if she was, maybe back in her day played a little bit of basketball, and that's why she was so determined to knock out this shot.
Who knows? Possibly.
Do you think, you're talking about, basketball scenes popular at the time? Do you think the scene in Prometheus is a reference to this? When Benedict Cumberbatch? No, not Benedict Cumberbatch. Who's the alien?
Michael Fassbender.
Michael Fassbender, yeah. Is that funny that I confused those two?
Yes, very funny.
I'm not gonna say they look
don't
the same.
look alike.
They don't. That scene in Prometheus, though, where this ship is asleep and Michael Fassbender, he's an android, and he's like passing the time, and I think he's like riding a bike in a circle and just sinking shots on the basketball court.
Oh yeah,
on the basketball court, just nailing them all. I wonder if that was a little, acknowledgement that this film exists.
Yeah, maybe so. That's fun.
Or just like in the future, basketball is the only sport that still exists.
I mean, you can shoot hoops on your own. It's one of the kind of things that I guess like isn't totally ridiculous to do by yourself.
It's true. I try to let you throw a football to myself. People look at me strange, but
only Mr. Perfect can do that. That's a deep cut for you guys there.
Very good.
Yeah. I guess we got to talk about the finale.
Yeah, the finale. So we mentioned, Ripley 8 has to take out the human alien that recognizes her as a mother. And it's good. It's at least interesting. It's not the same finale we've seen. It's not, like you said earlier, guns blazing against the alien threat. She tearfully does what she knows she has to do, and she has to watch her baby, somewhat, a creature she has kinship to, die by her hand, and die horrifically. That death is
Gnarly.
What a way to go.
Whoa.
She burns a hole in the wall of the ship, and as it starts sucking everything out of the room, it pulls the entire Humalian through like a hole the size of like a silver dollar, maybe.
Yeah,
and it just pulls its skin out and its innards and just sucks it out. Oh
my god, it is, and the whole time it's making this horrifying noise. Like it's just genuinely like horrifying, and it's this ridiculous thing. And I was just like, my god. And then like it's got these eyes. The Humalian has these like dog puppy eyes. And I think that's part of what makes it so unsettling, because it's this monstrous alien body, but there's these eyes that can switch to looking very innocent very quickly. And it happens multiple times. And it's every time I'm genuinely like, I don't like this. I don't like it. This is not cool. And so it's so in this scene, like it's looking at Ripley and like it's in pain, and it's trying to make it very clear to Ripley that like this hurts. And Ripley is like, I know it hurts, but I there's nothing else you clearly can't be trusted to just exist. You still default to your alien instincts. So in order to save everybody here, this is what has to happen. And it said without words, obviously, because the Humalian doesn't really speak. There's a couple of instances where it kind of sounds like it might, but it never does. And like I feel like when it first gets caught in the vortex, it says something like, "Oh no." It sounds kind of like it's trying to talk, but it never quite gets there. And
it's like Toka and Razor levels of speech.
Yeah, it never quite speaks in a classic sense. Like there's no moment where they're facing down with it and it just talks. But there's definitely moments where it feels like it's going there. But it's a very strange, like unsettling scene, because it is like there's this weird human uncanny valley to it that just it just makes it very unsettling. But it is a very gross scene. Like I said, it is like a silver dollar, and this entire alien, skull and all, is sucked right out of it. And
again, imagine the smell.
Why are you doing that to me? My God.
That's Alien Resurrection, though. That's I think, Andrew, I think we've hit all the high points. And if it wasn't made clear already, this isn't one of those movies that I'm telling you, like, we all got it wrong. Go and take a second look. Sometimes those movies do creep up on our show, but it is what it is. It is probably deserving of the legacy and reputation that you've heard this movie has, but it doesn't mean there's not genuinely good scenes in this movie, good action sequences, funny lines, and good performances.
I agree. I think that it's like anything, It's got moments where the director's kind of future work and his past work kind of shine through. You've got a talented cast that is all working to make it as memorable as possible, and it shines through inevitably. There's no way that it can't. You've just got a lot of talented people working on this movie, and that talent comes through. Like you said, are we going to say it's an underrated gem? I'm not going to tell you that everybody's sleeping. Like I said before, I'm not going to tell you that everybody is sleeping on Alien Resurrection, but there are things to enjoy here, like all things.
Well, Andrew, that means we have just one movie left this month for Alien and Predator month. Of course, it is Alien versus Predator. We're just covering the first movie. I know there is a sequel. Maybe we'll circle back around to it, but I think one is enough this go round. This is a movie that I have never seen before. I think you have, though, Andrew, right?
Might have seen this in theaters. This would have been, 2004, so would have been 17 potentially. So, but yeah, actually, my parents are big fans of it. My dad specifically likes AVP, as he calls it.
You got to get a quote. Just text your dad. Just say, "Hey, who's the Mark Strong in Alien vs. Predator?" Don't give any context. Just ask him that.
He's probably going to say it's Lance Henriksen. But sorry, spoiler, Chris.
I mean, you kind of already spoiled that for me last week. But yeah, text him.
He wasn't in this one.
I want your dad's thoughts on AVP, immortalized on an episode of Best of the Rest. So definitely,
all right,
touch base with with your
See
dad.
what I can do. All right. Can do.
And that's just good advice for everybody. Call your dad.
Call your dad. Don't watch Big Daddy and get to the end and realize you never talked to your dad again.
Big Daddy. That's the father-son movie that you go with? Big Daddy?
Yep.
It is a good one, though. One of... Like, Adam Sandler movies, there's the ones that we like probably because of the age we are when they came out, like Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore. But, there's this level of Adam Sandler movie where it's, like, a genuinely good movie. It's rare, but, there's that... That's the best of that tier Adam Sandler movie. If I put enough qualifiers on that to keep some praise on it.
I agree.
All right, it's time for question of the week, though. This week, our question comes from Mike Lynch, and this is a good question. They ask, what is your favorite fake band in a movie? It can be anything from The Dreams in Dreamgirls to the Kenosha Kickers in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Mine is the house band in From Dusk Till Dawn. That was what Mike said. That's not my answer, but
yes.
I love this question, and people in our Discord like this question. They even got some replies in the Question of the Week channel. OraMW says it's Powerline. The answer is always Powerline, and they've got a wonderful accompanying GIF to go along with it. Groffles just simply posts a GIF of the headbanging scene from Wayne's World, which, also a great answer. So, Andrew, there's a lot to choose from.
It's what fake band from Wayne's World? Is he talking about Crucial Taunt? Because I assume that's what he's got to be talking about. Because Wayne's not in a band.
Well, it is just the gifts, and maybe this wasn't implied.
Maybe he's just headbanging.
Maybe he's just headbanging into the question. Just showing his approval. The only way he knows how.
That all works, man.
What is the name of Cassandra's band?
Crucial Taunt.
Okay, yeah. That one's pretty good. When I think of Ballroom Blitz, that's the version that I think of.
Yes, I agree. And it's not the version that's on the soundtrack, much to my chagrin. It's the woman is singing it, but it's not the same version, and it doesn't sound as cool. This is a great question, because there's a lot of great fake bands throughout cinema. I guess the question the qualifier I would add is, we can talk about some other ones, but when you hear fake band, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
The first band that comes to my mind?
Yeah, what's your first,
fake band?
Not necessarily your favorite, but what's the first one you think of?
Ooh. Maybe Almost Famous, because the whole movie is about a fake band. Nothing's jumping to my mind, immediately. I'm kind of just scrolling through memories in my head. Is something coming to your mind immediately?
Spinal Tap. That's obviously my
okay. Well, there you go. Yeah, same concept. The entire movie built around a fake band.
Right. So, when I think fake bands, Spinal Tap is the first thing that comes to mind, just because, it's, and there's been plenty of movies about fake bands, and I actually just rewatched Airheads the other day.
Classic.
Speaking about Adam Sandler, what a strange band lineup. It's Adam Sandler on drums, Steve Buscemi on bass, and Brendan Fraser on guitar. But
Steve Buscemi, I swear, he's a part of 3 different generations.
He is. It's just so weird.
Is he young? Is he old? I don't know.
Because you watch him in Airheads, which comes out right around The Big Lebowski, and he looks 15 years apart in the ages in this movie. And then you watch him now in things, and he's just this weird, distinguished older gentleman, and it's so. He's just such a weirdly confounding actor in that how he fits into things. But the Lone Rangers, the band in Airheads, because you can pluralize Lone Ranger. That's a thing that people do. That Thing You Do, The Wonders, that's another one that I think of a lot. That was a movie I watched a lot as a kid. The Wonders are another one that I think of a lot. But Spinal Tap, I think, has got to be the peak.
Spinal Tap is pretty good. I would say personally, and I don't want to, this is me speaking, not your opinions maybe. Spinal Tap's a great answer for that band, the characters and the people will probably rank really high because they're funny and the hijinks in the movie. The music, I don't find myself listening to Spinal Tap songs outside of context. I know that's why I made it very clear. I'm just talking about myself because I'm sure you're a huge fan of them.
Who doesn't own Smell the Glove on vinyl?
when I think of favorite fake band, I'm kind of thinking of like the music that I genuinely enjoy and listen to outside of context. So like Josie and the Pussycats comes to mind. I love the movie.
It's a great
that
pick.
album rules. I mentioned way back on that episode that we have that vinyl in my house. It is spun regularly. It is some good stuff there. I like you know what? A Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg. That Stand Up and Shout song.
Yeah.
It is always stuck in my head. Like any given day, I might just belt that out when I'm alone in my house. It is forever in my brain. So that one ranks pretty high for me too.
Yeah.
Steel Dragon, just to get the name
Steel
of the
Dragon, yes. The Wonders are one of those for me. Like I know I've got some of their genuine songs from That Thing You Do just on one of my playlists that I listen to. I do have some Spinal Tap songs on there. Trying to think. I did just add the Lone Rangers, Degenerated, to the playlist as well. So it's making the rotation. But trying to think who else jumps out music wise. Like obviously I think John Candy's Polka King of the Midwest, Gus Polinski, is a memorable character, but like there's no music to that. They just hear them playing music in Home Alone in the van.
Yeah.
There's no cuts on the soundtrack from Gus Polinski, but that Josie soundtrack does slap.
It's pretty good. But are you confident in locking in your answer with Spinal Tap?
Yeah, I'm going Spinal Tap is the answer for me. Like I genuinely think that album has like the lyrics are funny, the music is still good. I regret they did like a weird, the three members of Spinal Tap like did an acoustic tour years and years ago randomly, and I regret not going. Just like it was weird watching 5 or 3 old guys just with acoustic guitars on stage playing Spinal Tap songs. But hey, we're getting another Spinal Tap movie, so we'll see if some new cuts come along with it.
So, all right, so one is coming to mind, and I'm doing some research fast and quick here, because if this is indeed a fake band, it's the one that I've listened to the most from a movie. So I'll lock it in as my answer, because I have heard it a ton of times. And it's from the movie Yes Man. Zoe Deschanel is in a band called Munchausen by Proxy, and I just want to confirm it is a fictional band, and it is. So they have, I think, 6 songs on the Yes Man soundtrack that I mean, way back when you had to like buy songs individually, you didn't just subscribe to a streaming service. Like I bought those songs, add to my collection, and I have since added them to my library and streamed them many, many times. Very catchy, very memorable, genuinely good stuff. I, without a doubt, as far as the fake band's songs, I have listened to those more than any other fake band. So I'll just lock in my answer as Munchausen by Proxy.
That sounds good. Obviously, Sex Bomb from Scott Pilgrim. That's another one that I can't believe I almost forgot. Big Fun from Heathers. Love Burger from Can't Hardly Wait. You don't really hear songs by these guys, but yeah, I hadn't thought about the Yes Man band in a long time.
I remember that music way more than I remember that movie. I saw the movie once or twice and can't tell you much about it, but the music's very good.
But yeah, I gotta go Spinal Tap. So 2 wildly different answers, fans.
Indeed. What is your answer? What is your favorite fake band from a movie? We would love to hear about it. Hit us up on social media, or you know what? Just hop into that Discord. You can ask us questions to be featured on future episodes. There's a link in our show notes. So if you haven't joined us already, by golly, what are you waiting for? It's free, it's fun, and it's interactive. What are some more buzzwords I can throw out there to get people to do this, Andrew?
Strategery.
It's strategery to join us in Discord. Let's see if that works. But you know what? We've got one more episode to go this month. And until next time, just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we're going to grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. It's all about Alien Resurrection. The movie that was released, I said Resurrection, right? For a second in my head, I thought I said Alien Erection, and I had to make sure I got that one right.
Whoops.
Whoop. Sometimes
Woo!
just get it on the mind, Andrew. The movie that was released November 20...
Jesus Christ, man. Pull it together. Sorry, I chuckled because I was like, I don't know if a flamethrower was the most humane way to put her down, but
slowly burned to death.
Yeah, that's the moment where I was like, oh, she's gonna do it, and I'm like, oh, you're setting her on fire. This seems less humane, honestly, but